be showing you a tutorial today using some of our pewter findings, and I'm calling this the Solarium earrings or pendant, depending on what you want to do and how you want to go about it. It's going to be using these pewter rings. They're called chain rings. They look like pieces of chain that are then soldered together. And the nice thing is they have these openings that'll allow me to sew in between them and create a bezel for a 14mm rivoli. When you're doing the solarium earrings, if you need any of the materials, below the video, there is a date stamp that says the date that this video was published. And below there, there's information about the different materials that are used. And if you click the show more button or the down arrows, there's links to these different products as well, if you do want some of the chain rings or the rivolis, seed beads, etc. So again, you can make this as a set of earrings, or you can make it as an actual pendant. It's 29mm, so it's not a small piece. It's a little bit bigger, and the 14mm rivoli is going to sit right in the middle, just to give you an idea as far as the weight. It's actually not very heavy, so I'm fine wearing it as a pair of earrings. And also, just to show you what I did here, these are the glue-in SS39 chaton earrings with the lever backs. They're the Potomacs, and I have them that I have a number of different things that can hang down from those with jump rings and hang from the back. I have some tassels, and I did them in that kind of nice Colorado color, that way they match with everything, and those hang just right on the bottom of there. So for the actual piece itself, depending on if you're doing one or two, I'll give you the materials for one. They come in packs of 2 for the rings, so you'll need 1 ring and 1 14mm rivoli. Here in the middle, I did the peach color of the example. I'm going to be using the aqua in the one that we build together. In addition to that, you have some delica beads. The delicas we're going to weave in and out between the chain openings to create this nice bezel. In the example piece, I used the Duracoat galvanized copper color, and I'm going to be using the matte aqua AB in the example with you today. In addition to the delica beads, there are 15O seed beads that create the bezel, and then 11O seed beads that sit in the middle of the piece, as well as hold the piece in along the back. Depending on if you like the more intricate or the more simple, you can decide which way you want to face your rivoli. Also, if you do a clear crystal rivoli, they're actually interchangeable, and you can wear them front or back, depending on which way you like. For the 15Os here, it's the Duracoat galvanized champagne color. In the 15O, I'm going to be using the Duracoat galvanized silver color in 15O with the blue. With this one here, I also have that Duracoat orchid color in the 11O, and these are all Miyuki seed beads, and I have that also along the back in groups of 5 as we catch the back. I'm going to be using the 11O in this matte charcoal color, which is almost a really dark gray, but it has a tiny hint of a blue, which we're going to work together with these rings. The whole thing is going to be strung with 0.006 wildfire beading thread, and I have the gray color since I'm using silver beads and I'm using a silver piece to bezel inside of. I also have a size 10 needle. You'll want a 10 and a 12 handy, or just one 12 needle will work. I also like to have handy my thread zap or my thread burner. The thread burner is going to be used to burn the ends of the thread as we're working with it and as you finish off. I also use that to burn the thread off the spool, and then I take a needle nose pliers and just flatten out the thread in order to put it into the needle. To get started, we are going to begin with our outer row of our chain here for the ring and our delica beads. So you'll need about 4 feet of beading thread on your needle and a little pile of your delicas out for us to get ready to create the bezel for that 14mm rivoli. So to get started, it's very simple. What we're going to be doing is creating basically a way to grab onto the beads in order to create this netting design. Very simple. If you can count to 2, you can do this project. So I have on my 4 feet of thread onto my needle, and then I have a stop bead, just a 15O seed bead at the very end of the thread, leaving about a 3-inch tail, just something that I can hold onto and tie a knot onto. What you're going to do is sew through one of the holes. Doesn't matter where, you're just sewing through a hole, and the 15O seed bead will stop it from coming out the end. We're going to be sewing in and out of every hole and adding 2 delica beads as we do so. So we're coming out of this hole, which we'll call hole 1, and we're going to sew down into hole number 2. I'll turn it on its side so you can see then those 2 seed beads are just going to kind of hang out right there along the side. From here, pick up 2 more delicas and sew up hole 3. That will put 2 beads along the back. So it's going to look like these are woven into the design, picking up 2, then sewing down the 5th hole, pick up 2, and you're going to sew up the 6th hole. So it's just like sewing in and out, kind of doing a snaking design there. You can see the beads going from one side then to the other, and they're snaking back and forth. This is also a really cool idea, just the way that it is, to work with chain. I've seen some really pretty necklaces with the chain done this way, just seed beads going in and out. Really smart, fun, simple idea. So again, 2 beads go in, you sew down the next hole, add 2 more beads, and then sew up the next one. And you're just going to continue doing that zigzagging pattern, going from one hole to the other, sewing up and down, adding in those 2 beads the whole way around, back till you get to your stop bead. So I'm going to put the last 2 beads in place, and I'm going to be going up through the bead hole which has the stop bead in it. So it's going to fit perfectly with the beads going in and out each circle. Like I said, this adds color and design. If you want it to have a smoother look, you can use 15-0s, and you can simply do a nice little ring like that to add to your design. So you don't have to limit it to something a little bit more ornate. You can keep it nice and simple. As you come back to the start then, what we're going to do is we're going to add a 3rd seed bead in. So we have our groups of 2. In the place where we go backwards now, we're going to add 1 seed bead. So we're going to go through and create that same kind of snaking design like this, but we're going to be adding 1 bead at a time. So again, I came out the hole of where the stop bead was, that hole number 1 where I got started. Instead of progressing the same way, we're going to reverse the opposite way. Adding 1 bead instead of 2, I'm going to add 1 bead and sew back through the last hole that I just came out of. Again, continue 1 bead and go into the next hole on the opposite side. So basically we've decorated one side, and we're just adding these extra 11-0 in between each. So as we add the delicas, we're going back through and snaking through both holes as well. So you can see it's going to look a little bit more full, and going from that back and forth design to looking like a more full design. So again, just like we did adding 2, we're doing going the opposite way, just adding 1 at a time, sewing through. As you sew through, you want to make sure that you're not coming out any of the seed beads that are already there. Add another bead, sew back through. So your needle's always coming out near kind of that empty space. You add a delica, and then you move on to the next empty space. So I'm going to go through now, back around the whole piece so you get that nice full look, adding in 1 more delica between each of your links. So I've added in my last of my delica beads, and you can see that it pretty much keeps the whole row almost covered. You're not seeing a lot of that crossover chain, you just see the inner and the outer portion of the chain. Again, keep this in mind for the chain of the pendant. If you want to do a pendant, you can do this with chain as well, zigzagging into the different links of the chain to get a fun look for the actual hanging if you want to do it as a pendant. I'm back to that stop bead where I added in my first beads. So I'm at the opposite side. You should be at the opposite side of that stop bead coming out here, and you do not need to add any more of your delicas. So your delicas are all done. You can kind of push them out of the way, and it's going to be time to add in your 11-0 seed beads. So you want to grab your 11-0s, make a little pile of 11-0s, and your count here, if you can count to 3 and to 7, you are good to go. So basically what we're going to be doing is counting every seed bead in groups of 3. So you can see there's 3, 3, 3, 3. we're going to be going into the second of every group of 3 of our delica beads, and we're going to add 7 15-0s. Then we're going to skip over to the next group of 3 and go into the second bead, add 7 15s, and so forth. So the first thing I'm going to do is pick my first group of 3, which is going to be right here. I'm going to sew through bead number 1 and bead number 2, which is also going to make the delicas look a little bit more like a consistent line. And after I'm coming out of the second bead, I'm going to grab 7 of my 15s. And once I have 7 15s on my needle, I'm going to go to the next group of 3 and sew through. If you want to, instead of thinking it as groups of 3, you can think of it as sew through a bead, skip 2 beads, sew through a bead, skip 2 beads, sew through a bead. So whichever way is easier for you in order to add your 7 15s will work. So I have my 7 15s, I skip 2 beads, and I sew through the next one, which is going to be the middle bead of that grouping of 3. You want to make sure that your thread doesn't cross over at all, and you're starting these little peaks here. This obviously is going to be the front of the pendant. The back is very simple. Once we finish the front, we're just going to go in and basically link on every 7 beads to the back section. So the front, again, we just continue adding in groups of 7 these 15-0 seed beads. So I pick up 7, skip 2 beads, and sew through the next bead. Again, make sure that those don't cross over anywhere. Kind of play around with your thread, make sure that's a peak. And then we're on to the next area. So again, 7 more go on, skip 2 beads, and sew into the next bead. So you're going to continue this the whole way around the circle. As I'm finishing the design, you can almost see that it kind of looks like a crown there. We're going to add in our last of our 7 beads, which is going to put us back through that first delica bead that our thread was coming out of. And what we're going to do is step up to the points of those groups of 7. So the reason we did an odd count number of seed beads is so we would have one that would go into a point in order to catch in that 11-0 between them to create the bezel. So I'm going to sew up through the first 4 15s that we put on the project. Once we come out of those first 4, I'm going to be at the point of that first little triangle that I created. From now on, I'm going to catch on to the point, which is going to be that 4th bead in every group of 7. Just like I kind of caught on to the delica, I'm going to be adding one of my charcoal 11-0s. And if you want to keep more of the color, you can also add a delica in between. I'm going to add a charcoal bead and then sew through the next grouping of my 7 15s going through bead number 4. That's going to pull those little triangles that we created in towards the center. Again, another charcoal bead goes on. Count up to your 4th bead of your 15s and sew through. This is going to continue the whole way through, adding in an 11 along the design. Some of the peaks are naturally going to have that 4th bead sticking up, which makes it easier. You can see then as you pull them in, it creates that nice little netting that has a little bit of curvature to it in order for your beads, or your pendant, excuse me, that rivoli to sit inside. So I'm going to go the whole way around, adding in the 11-0s, pulling those seed beads in to make that nice solarium sun design. And from here then we will drop the rivoli into the back and basically go in and reinforce the back and make sure that it's not going to open up by adding in some more 11-0s along the back. As you circle around, catching all of these center points, we are going to get to a point where we're back at the start. And when I'm back at the start, I'm going to use that opportunity to reinforce that center line. So the center line, I am going to go back through the entire center line with my thread, not adding any beads, just reinforcing this center line. Anytime I work with a rivoli or anytime I'm capturing something inside of seed beads and it actually doesn't have a hole, in this case the rivoli or a cabochon, I always go back through that central row more than once. I usually go back through 2 times because you don't want your piece to come out the center. Or that center line, if it is tight, you don't want it to snap and you to lose usually what is the most valuable portion of your project. So after going through, I have 1 more of my 11s and that charcoal color to add. I'm going to go back through that first 15 that our thread was coming out of, give a nice tight pull, and pull that sun design in. You can see now I'm going to put my rivoli in, and it has a nice kind of brilliant blue look to it. From here again, I'm going to circle back through all of those central seed beads, and then I'll show you how we get to the back of the pendant. So I've reinforced that center line going through each of the corner or that point 15 and the 11 seed beads that I added. I'm going to go back through, so I'm coming out a 15 seed bead, and from there I'm going to go down the side of one of those V's. From there I'm going to go through the delica beads and follow the line of the thread till I get to one of the ends of those lines and go back to the other side of that chain ring. My thread is now coming out the back side. So I have my little bezel there and I have my beads in place, but I don't actually have any rivoli in there yet. So you're just going to drop that in, and then we're going to get ready to bezel in the back. The back itself is really simple. It's just 5 11-0s that are caught in 5 different places of the design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew through one of the delica beads that my thread is closest to and come on out. Get ready with your charcoal beads. And again, groups of 5 and 5 groups of 5. You can play around. You don't have to do the 5 groups of 5. You can do a different count. That's up to you. So I'm going to add my 5 11s. And then I'm going to count delicas over 7 beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And sew through number 7. And then I'm going to pull those seed beads in nice and tight. Sorry, 1 too many. I'm going to sew back out that. And I went 1 too many over. And sew through. Alright, then the next 5 go on. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Count over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you can see I'm holding the rivoli in right there, but I actually don't need to. I could keep it out if I wanted to. In goes your next 5 or 6 11s. Count over. And you can see what you're doing is pulling them in the back just enough to get them to hold the pendant in place. If you want to, you could also, before I have it caught in here, I'll flip it over to show you, use this as a nice simplistic design to hold in your rivoli. And you could do it on the front and the back if you don't want to get that sun look. So I'm going to continue now adding my 5 beads in, which are just big enough with those 11-0s and just creating enough of a tightness in order to hold my seed beads along the back up a little bit and that rivoli in place. So I'm going to continue adding in till I have my last of my 5 to add here. I'm going to take those right across the back of the rivoli. Once I'm done putting them along the back, all I have to do is actually tie off my thread. So I have the front of the Solarium Pendant finished, and I'm going to come to the back of the piece and actually do my bail if you want to. That you can go from the front to the back. What I did for the earring here, since I'm using it as an interchangeable earring, or you can put it on a lever back. I have a small jump ring, 20 gauge, that's in between the chain, and then another jump ring hanging out there. I'm going to do the same thing before attaching the chain to this pendant. So all I need to do is get my thread ends to match and right next to one another in order to tie off the thread. So I'm going to take the thread and needle, reinforcing the back through, the 11 O's and the delica beads, till I get to the point where that starter stop bead is. I want to make sure then to take off that starter stop bead, pull the thread towards the back of the design of the piece, so I have my knot and my thread at the back. So you can see I'm sewing up the back right there till my thread comes out at the exact same place as the stop bead. Go back to that 15-0 then that we put on, take it off, pull the threads towards the back of the piece, and simply tie the two thread ends into a knot right along the back there, and then into another knot. I'll then take my thread burner and burn down the edges, and then add in my jump ring. And again, my jump ring is just going to go in between the links of the chain, so there's space for that. If you want to, and you want to create a seed bead, bezel, or bail, you can do that as well. So I have my 3 knots here. I'm pulling that knot towards the back of the piece. Take my cover off my thread burner. Burn those thread edges down, again towards the back, and burn those edges nice and flush against the project. There I have my little piece. Again, I'm just going to take another jump ring, add that jump ring onto the pendant. You can do that with a needle nose pliers or a flat nose pliers, and just go in between the actual little links there and link on that jump ring. Then just to show you what I'm going to do with the chain that I hang the piece from is I'm going to weave the seed beads just like I did on the chain piece back and forth. So I have my thread and needle still ready to go, and I'm going to go to the end of the chain here. You can decorate any portion of the chain. I'm just going to start about 3 inches down, take my thread through the end of the chain, or like 2 inches, and tie a knot. This is just a simple Rollo chain, an Italian silver Rollo chain. I have it cut to about 18 inches, and I've already gone ahead and put a lobster clasp on one end. And after tying that thread on, what I am going to do is simply weave my blue beads, my delica beads, back and forth along the piece. Actually, I think what I'll do is I'll put in some of those charcoal too. I'll do it in groups of 3. And it's going to depend on the actual size of the loops, how far you go down each loop. You can see that most chain has jump rings or loops that go every other direction. That's basically what we're going to be going and catching on, is every other direction. So in this case, since it's a fine chain, I'm going to add delica, then an 11, then a delica. I'm going to skip down 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of chain and go into the 5th area. And that's going to decorate the side of the chain with my beads. Again then, I'm going to decorate the side, doing my groups of 3. Count down, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you want to try to get the chain, you can see, just like if you're thinking of it just like the chain ring, you're going to try to get it that it snakes back every other way. So I'm going to go in then and snake it back through the chain. You can see that it's going to go every other way. Again, delica, 11, delica, hold the chain flat so you know that it's snaking the opposite way, and catch on to the opposite bead. So there you have it. So that's going to decorate the side of my chain as I go and get ready to put on my pendant. So I'm just going to repeat that going in and out of the chain, creating that nice little seed beaded snake. So once you get all of your seed beads along the chain, all I had to do was attach it with a jump ring right along the bottom, and then you have that fun chain that looks like it was identical and really set out and designed to go with the pendant. So it's kind of a fun addition to the actual chain that you can use on a number of different projects, not just this pendant. Again, if you want to, you can make this into a pair of earrings, or you can make it into the pendant as such. And when you do so, you can have fun creating mix and matching colors, and also checking out some of the forms that you already have as far as ideas for sewing in and out and doing kind of those mixed media projects with the seed beading. Again, if you need any of the materials, you can go back to the beginning of the video to where I've listed out all the materials that I'm using. You can also go below the video to that little date stamp which says when the video was published, and then also that show more down arrow button to get the different links to purchase these items from us online. Also, if you'd like to, you can always subscribe to this YouTube channel. That will get you regular updates on the different videos we do, different product spotlights, new things coming to the market, as well as really just what's going on in the beading world. As always as well, you can shop with me at potomacbeads.com. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, check out our Pinterest page, as well as join our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. There is a wonderful interactive group of people that love to design, are super helpful, give great inspiration, technique help, and advice as well. So check that out if you get a chance also. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have fun making the Solarium Pendant.